But let's talk population growth, Patrick. We showed some interesting charts here at the beginning about the population growth. Now, what's interesting is Canada has had a record number of immigration in the last couple of years, but really Alberta is even outpacing that, Patrick, because people are coming into Canada and then immediately moving to Alberta, a lot of them, and you can see that the population growth in Alberta is 4.5% year over year is where it's at. And this is pretty significant, Patrick, because this is huge. If you look just a couple of years ago, I mean, it was hovering around 1% forever for a really long time. And I think Alberta got used to that, and then now 4.5%, and you're seeing that in the Alberta real estate market. A lot of growth over there happening, and a big driving part of that is all the incoming people, which we talk about. Population is one of the economic fundamentals that drives real estate market.
Yeah, at the end of the day, we are challenged as a country. Alberta is going to and has got increasingly growing challenges when it comes to population growth. So let's look at population growth into Alberta, into Canada. As we said earlier on, it's what really is a big part of what's driving our economy now. Even as real estate starts to slow down, what's driving us economically is in fact the immigration. Now, when you look at what's going on in Alberta and you see the off the charts growth, the record growth, it is ultimately a race to affordability. The challenges that now Alberta is facing, like the rest of the country, and we're seeing, for example, what was happening in Toronto, Vancouver, our major cities, is the fact that we don't have the infrastructure to support it. And I mean the infrastructure of the places to live is one side of the equation. We keep seeing the housing and the real estate market feeling the pressure of people coming in. Where are people working and where can they work is another issue, and it's a big issue that's starting to impact. But then we look at the healthcare, we even look at transportation, and do we have the support that we need for a growing population at that speed and at that volume of people coming in, JG?
That's something, Patrick, that's interesting. I've noticed this big shift essentially since post COVID. And I don't know if it's driven by the immigration, but one thing I definitely see, and I'd love to see some stats on this, maybe the producers can pull something up for another episode, but I've seen a ton of people take public transportation that didn't usually take public transportation. And I don't know if it's because of a lack of affordability, and it's obviously more expensive than ever to drive a car, buy a car, insure a car, put fuel in the car, so on and so forth. But like, I'm seeing lineups at the bus stop, and that is just not something I saw 5 years ago. You didn't see people, like, you may see one person at a bus stop. Now you see like 5, 6, 7 people at a bus stop routinely in Peterborough, and that's a change. And I think I'm curious, why do you think that is, Patrick?
I think it's a number of things. I think, certainly you've got a certain demographic that doesn't even want to own a car, and that is the cost of the car, to your point, insurance, parking, gas, like putting fuel in it, all of those things, number one. Number two, new Canadians don't want to drive in this particular country. They're not equipped to do it. They may not have the skills that you need to be able to drive in the country. And then let's face it, I mean, a lot of cases, public transport is the most efficient way to travel. When you're into a heavy populated area, which is in the major cities that you're seeing, Peterborough, not as much, but even in Peterborough, I think that's more of an affordability issue. But you look at Toronto, and to get around, the most efficient and effective way to do that is public transport. We're seeing that, and fortunately in Calgary, and we talked about Alberta, look at what's happening in Calgary and Edmonton, the infrastructure, rapid transit, that's what they want us to do anyways, but ultimately that's what's happening. And I think that's going to continue. You're going to see more and more of that, because it's just efficient, effective. It is a cost-effective way to get around.
But check this out, Patrick. I want to share. I'm gonna put up a photo here of something pretty wild. And this, you want to talk about the future of transportation? I mean, it's interesting because I think there's no doubt there's this kind of this flow towards public transportation. But check this picture out, Patrick. I was in the grocery store. I come out, I get into my big dually, 3,500 gas guzzling, fuel consuming, thing costs like $1,000 a month on fuel. And as I go, and this guy is ripping through the parking lot at the grocery store, and I say to him, "Hey, buddy," I said, "Come over here. Let me talk to you about this thing." And I'll show you here. I want to put it up on the screen. Check this out. So this, by the way, this is an electric vehicle, Patrick. an electric vehicle. Talked about electric vehicles. It might get. Are we going to get a little heated on this show about electric vehicles? Maybe we will. But check this out. This thing here costs $600, Patrick. This thing here goes 60 kilometers an hour, and it lasts. I forget how many hundreds of kilometers on the charge. It was like this was incredible. This was totally this guy's mode of transportation. And in the wintertime, I'm not shitting you, this is an all-wheel drive, and in the wintertime, he put off-road tires. Like, he put winter tires on it, and he would keep using this in the wintertime. And there's, of course, this isn't going to work in Edmonton. It's not going to work in Timmins, Ontario. But there's no reason this won't work in Vancouver. There's no reason it won't work in Toronto. There's no reason. Well, Montreal's a different story because they get a lot of snow over there. But the point is that this is going to chew up a big part of the market as well, Patrick, as it comes to vehicles and vehicle sales. A lot of the younger people, up to a certain point, but the kids at 15, 16 years old, they're not going to want a car like you and I did. They're going to want one of these things, and they're going to drive this thing until their mid-20s, until they have a family, until they have a wife or a husband or whatever. I mean, what do you think about this? I'm just fascinated by this because I think this here is going to, take a lot of vehicle sales and postpone people's vehicle sales into the future.
Yeah, I agree. I think it's all changing. I mean, we have to look into the future. When we look 10 years down the road, we're going to see a lot more technology, and this is really technology. So at the end of the day, we start to see that from a cost effective way of transportation, this is where younger people are definitely going to go. And I don't think it's even 15, 16. I'm saying really up into the late 20s is where people are going to continue to use this mode of transportation. Ultimately, people are getting married a little bit later. They're living in different circumstances. So ultimately, I mean, think about this. You don't have to park it. You take it down or up into your condo or down into your suite, whatever it might be. It's an effective way to get around. So, I agree. I think this is definitely a growing trend.
Now, Patrick, I'm just poking the bear here because I love to do that. But how do you think this is going to fit into the 15-minute cities?
I think that's a great question. And I ultimately think that this is exactly what 15-minute cities are going to be about. I don't know yet how much of what the charges will be. This isn't public transportation. It's not walking. So is there going to be a special kind of, allowance for scooters? I have no idea. I'm suspecting that they'll use this as, okay, you're not using a gas-powered vehicle to leave your district. So there you go.
I think it's interesting that, and listen, they still have a lot of stuff to figure out because I'm telling you, like these things here in Peterborough, we have these really cool paved nature trails where people walk and so on and so forth. But you get a couple, and I say kids, but it doesn't matter. It could be adults too. You get a couple people with some of these zipping down that at 50, 60 kilometers an hour. It's a hazard, man. These things are fast. And there's no doubt they're going to have to figure that part out. And I think that's why they're doing a lot of bike lanes, Patrick, in places like Edmonton, which I know is another hot button for you. I'm purposely trying to poke your hot buttons just to get a little bit of reaction from you.
Not gonna happen.
But I think that's why cities are investing so much money in bike lanes. It's not because they expect people are going to be biking all the time, but I think we're going to see more and more of this type of transportation.
Well, you speak of Edmonton. I mean, Edmonton had the whole scooter program across the city where you just grab a scooter, swipe your card, ride it, it bills you, drop it off wherever you want to abandon it. And there was like hundreds of scooters all over the city. And so, Edmonton's already adopted this. So this is not new in that regard. It's like the rental bikes that they have I think Vancouver still has them. And certainly in Europe, it's a big thing where you just grab a bike, swipe your card, whatever.
The Bixie bikes. I think they're called Bixie bikes or something.
Yeah.
Well, one of the producers was in Oslo recently, and they're talking about how these are very, very big. I think Europe adopts this stuff way faster than North America does. There's no doubt about that. But here's my question for you. Let's bring it down to the real estate level, Patrick. Is how do you see? Let's just say it becomes a mass adoption of this stuff. And this is what you and I have we've held conferences on this in the past, you and I. But let me poke you right here, right now, while you're in Hawaii. sipping on margaritas. By the way, are you having margaritas right now? Like I know it's only
No,
eight in the morning
I,
there, but
dude, you know, I quit drinking. I quit drinking.
oh
So
yeah, that's right. Yeah, you're better that way, by the way. But you're right.
my body is a temple. My body's a temple. I'm, you know, it's just,
Here's my question: as we go more and more into this vein of transportation, and as we go more and more down this path, and if you extrapolate this forward, how do you see this impacting real estate though? Because a lot of real estate, listen, our cities have been built around cars driving and the number of cars on the road and all that stuff. And as we go more and more towards mass adoption of this kind of transportation, it's going to have a major effect on cities and it's going to have a major effect on real estate. Now, I don't think it's going to happen overnight where people won't see it coming. I think if you have your eyes open, you'll see it coming. But forecast for me where you see this going in the future, Patrick, because this is very, very interesting to me from a real estate perspective.
I think you make a really good point. I haven't really thought that one through, so I don't know that I have the answer. But if I was just to kind of take it for face value in terms of the question, I mean, to your point, a lot of real estate changed when you had access. So in other words, you know, for years it was about access. And if all of a sudden, you know, this particular neighborhood that wasn't accessible before, and all of a sudden there's a street and there's a highway to it, and then all of a sudden you had boom, this whole road. It's like Peterborough, you know, real estate prices. What happened with real estate prices in Peterborough was they exploded after they opened up 407, and all of a sudden, you know, an hour and a half or 2 hour drive turned into a 45-minute or an hour drive, depending on where you're coming from. So there's that aspect of it. I think the nature of what's happening in terms of population growth, we still have to understand the fundamental. People need a place to live. I think that we've already seen and will continue to see, and although many people are going, well, people are going to go back to the office, going to have to start driving, and everybody's going to be working from the office. No, we're, you know, certainly the amount of people that are working from home that don't need the vehicle, that is not going to go away. I don't know if it'll continue to grow, but I don't think it's going to shrink. I think you're going to continue to see that work from home cohort that don't need a vehicle, that will, you know, having a scooter is going to be very, very effective and it will work. So I think, I don't know what the dynamic of it would be. I don't think it's going to have a direct impact on real estate. However, back to, you know, 15-minute cities and districts and all those kinds of things, that is the one that I don't know what's going to happen. We gotta wait and see how that unfolds in the cities that are doing the 15-minute city concept. But ultimately, I have to go back to the foundation of demand is demand for real estate when it comes to having a place to live. Immigration is the bigger driver of it. Transportation changes will still have an impact on neighborhoods because people will still be driving car. Whether they're autonomous, JG, you know, we talk about, you know, autonomous, doesn't matter. They still need roads, they still need access. So I don't see it as a big impact.
Yeah, but you know, I think you hit the nail on the head there with the word access, which is, and you got to think. I mean, as a real estate investor myself, I can tell you that when I'm buying real estate now, I'm asking myself, I'm trying to get into the habit of already asking myself the questions: are there bike lanes around here? Does the city have a plan to put bike lanes on this road? Are there any backcountry trails, or in Peterborough, like I said, we got these railway trails that are paved that are really good for these kinds of scooters. Are there any of those nearby? The same way I used to check, where's the closest Tim Hortons? Where's the closest grocery store? Where's the closest Starbucks? Where's the closest schools? I still do all of that, but I'm asking a few new questions, which is, are there bike lanes? Will there be bike lanes? Are there any proposed plans? And that kind of changes how you look at things. And then I'm also looking at my apartments as I do renovations. I look at apartments a little differently. I'm asking myself the question, if one of my tenants has one of these, well, where are they going to charge it? Is there an easy, convenient spot for them to plug it in at the front door? Is there a closet? Is there an easy space for them to just store it at the front, or do they have to bring this up to their bedroom? These are just different questions that I think real estate investors should get in the habit of. Listen, this trend is not here yet, but if you wait until the trend is here, you will have missed the opportunity. And I think that's what's important about real estate investors is you want to get ahead of these waves. And right now, there's a lot of things happening in the world that are creating these waves. Some not so good, some really good. But as an investor, it's your job to be ahead of these waves.
JJ, you make some really good points in what you've said there. And I want to shine a light on something. The way we buy real estate, whether it's a first-time home buyer or a next-time home buyer or us as an investor, there's a lot of people, and we see it in the headlines, we see a lot of expectations and comparisons to what once was, and what boomers did, and X amount of times income versus prices, 3 times income to buy a house, now it's 12 times or 10 times or whatever the number is. It doesn't matter. The point is that we live in an old story. To your point, as investors, as the real estate world has changed forever. Okay, I'm going to say it again. Real estate has changed forever. We're not going back ever to what once was. We have to look into the future and anticipate the shifts that are happening, and we're living through it. And to your point, if we don't take into consideration, okay, I have this property, I'm a rental housing provider. What is the client demographic that I want to attract? What are they going to be driving? What do they need for services? What are they going to want for location in terms of access to trails and stores and all of the rest of it? And how are they going to get to those stores? Are they walking? Are they biking? Are they on a scooter? So these are all things, so aside from banking and getting mortgages, down payments, and the cost of all of those things, understood. But we as investors have to look into the future knowing that we can't hang on to a story that'll be going back to what it once was. And I just want to really emphasize that as investors, and as within RAIN and what you and I do and what we look at in terms of economic fundamentals, what we look at in terms of the how-tos of investing in real estate, the game is changing, and we have to continue to look into the future and anticipate the shifts that are happening. And I think you shone a great light on a big part of that when we're analyzing a property.
Yeah, it's a good point, Patrick. And there's certainly a lot of people, you and I hear of them and hear them very often. There's probably people watching this show that spend all their time and their effort and their energy, talking about a story that once was, and they're stuck in that old story and they can't seem to break through, and they just can't see the future for what it is. And I think that's a dangerous place for investors to be, because then you spend all your time looking in the rearview mirror, and you just can't drive a car or any vehicle looking in the rearview mirror. You have to look forward. You have to make decisions for the future, because this thing's moving forward, and there's a lot of opportunity. And you have to, maybe a challenge for some, but you have to force yourself to look for those opportunities, go find them. That's your job as an investor, is to look for these opportunities, go find them, and go take advantage of these opportunities, because there's a lot of them out there, Patrick. There's also a lot of tough stuff, but there's a lot of opportunities out there.
There is a lot, and within the chaos, there always is. The challenge that many face, and we're seeing it, many are sitting on the sidelines for all the reasons that they are. That's less access to capital. When you had a line of credit that you could tap into at 2% or even 3% to use as a down payment, those things are off the table, because that line of credit's now costing you 7, 8, 10%, whatever that might be. So access to capital to use as investment is much more difficult. And then, of course, mortgage financing. There's a lot of headwinds, but for those who are patient, who take the time it takes, who are willing to do the grind, and this will speak to the dwellings under construction that we want to talk about. And when we start to consider that breakdown, so we've got immigration growth, we've got, which is population growth, we got people moving in, we know that demand is high for rental properties. Our job is to say, okay, how do we actually be that rental housing provider? And then what is the asset class that we tap into in terms of property type, JG? And this is where I think that when we look at these numbers and we look at that detached, what they refer to as single family, but that detached property is really going to be the new real estate gold or real estate Bitcoin. It's that rare asset that I think we have to try and get our hands on, and that's where I want to put some time and energy. And I know you, as a developer, are looking at those detached units and going, okay, I'm going to suite it, I'm going to do an ADU, I'm going to do something, and which is, of course, a lot of what we talk about. If you like what you learned here, go to the description below and subscribe for our free Insiders newsletter, where you can also stay up to date for our upcoming events and our courses.